Before we begin, thank you so much for coming to us in the studio. You guys are fresh off the boat from your ACE Market listing on the 25th of November.
My name is Edward. I'm one of the directors in the Polymer Link group. We are the manufacturer of polyethylene powder.
Maybe share with us a little bit about your revenue breakdown that changed over the past few years.
Philippines and India are two of our top largest. But as of today, we have seen tremendous growth in our Australian market as well. Because like I said earlier, rotational molding process, they rely very heavy on this raw material itself. This industry is actually a very niche one. So what we have always placed ourselves in this industry is to differentiate ourselves to our competitor, and we do not try to delve too much into the commodity region. Apart from the geographical region that we are everywhere, that reduces the lead time for them to get our product, there is also the stickiness factor from the high quality products that we sell to them.
Hello there and welcome to Kleverstock. My name is Wan Izul Islam right here, and we've got a very special interview lined up for you today, a feature corporate interview with none other than Mr. Edward Koh. He is the director from Polymer Link Holdings Berhad, all right, also known as Polymer Link Group. So, before we begin, thank you so much for coming to us in the studio. You guys are fresh off the boat from your ACE Market listing on the 25th of November. Please do introduce yourself, a little bit about Polymer Link. Tell us a bit about what you are.
Hi, it's a pleasure having to be here. Thanks for having us. My name is Edward. I'm one of the directors in the Polymer Link group. What I do on a daily basis in the company, basically, I hit the supply chain of our company, and what I do is I talk to our suppliers and some of our key customers and manage the supply chain in between them to ensure that our customer gets the raw material in time. What our company do is we are the manufacturer of polyethylene powder. So where we stand in this supply chain is in between our suppliers such as Petronas, Lotte Titan, as well as our end user customer who are into this rotational molding industry. So rotational molding industry is actually something very niche in the entire polyethylene industry. The more well-known ones are things like injection molding, blow molding, and film blowing. And what's so special about this industry that we are in, rotational molding, our customers are quite heavily reliant on the raw material that we produce, that we sell to them. Because for other industry, the injection moldings and blow moldings and film blowings, they have heavy upfront machinery costs, and they rely on those machinery to produce very good end product.
Fantastic. Okay, so that pretty much covers up the first question, which was to briefly share a little bit about what kind of products that Polymer Link manufactures. In terms of, it might not be easy to understand that petrochemical products produced by your company. What are petrochemical products? Maybe you can share with us a little bit about what the end products that we are able to see in our daily lives. Maybe, we might notice it, but it's actually from you guys. So what are the end products that you can share with us that are manufactured by using your company's petrochemical products?
Okay, so one of the most common products that you probably seen on the way to work this morning are the orange and white barriers on the roads. Those are produced via rotational molding process. So rotational molding process generally produce large hollow parts. So some of other examples that you may have not seen are those huge water tanks that you see on some industrial buildings, on top of rooftops of the residential areas. Playground slides on the park, those are also produced using rotational molding method that uses our polyethylene powder. And apart from that, there are those cooler boxes, and in the marine industry, the marine buoys, the anti-piracy barriers that they use around the vessel to prevent pirates from boarding the ships.
Oh wow,
These are some of these products that is produced using rotation molding
No,
process.
I'm looking out the window right now. I think I can see some of your products right there. Those are the water tanks that you mentioned about, right?
Yes, yes. They usually can hold water up to 20,000, 10,000 liters of that size.
Wow, that is huge indeed. All right, which brings me to my next question. Okay, you guys are in the industry and you produce a lot of day-to-day products that you just mentioned. But do you personally consider Polymer Link a Malaysian business-centric company? If not, where are the few principal geographical markets covered by your company, as well as maybe share with us a little bit about your revenue breakdown that changed over the past few years?
Okay, so the company itself consists of three main shareholders. There's the Malaysian party, that we have an Irish partner, and two Filipinos as main shareholders from the get-go. So the reason why we are in Malaysia is because this business is primarily managed by the Malaysian party, and we situated ourselves in Port Klang 10 years ago. Why Port Klang? It's because from the start of the business, we have always targeted ourselves overseas, and during that time, we were doing like 95% export. Up to today, we are still hovering around above 90% export. So I wouldn't call ourselves Malaysia-centric business. But even with that said, Malaysia itself, because it's managed by the Malaysian team, we have our headquarters here, and our R&D center in Malaysia is also one of the top-notch in the industry. Two other locations that we have manufacturing facilities are the India and the Philippines. And if we talk about our revenue breakdown in terms of geographical region, Philippines and India are two of our top largest during the start. But as of today, we have seen tremendous growth in our Australian market as well, where we have trading outposts over there. Apart from Australia, we have some revenues that is derived from the Europe and USA, where USA we have also yet another trading outpost. So what you can see from there is a very diverse and very risk sort of widespread across the region, so that any seasonality in terms of revenue in any countries are offset by another country across the sea.
That's good. I mean, you've got basically all your holes filled and covered. I mean, it's good to note that you've got many trading outposts, especially in Australia, Europe, as well as USA. I mean, you're not only based solely in the Asian region, but also across the globe, which is really good. And it has a little bit of a competitive strength, don't you think? And that brings me to my next question. We believe, that Polymer Link, they have their own competitive strengths. You mentioned a little bit about how versatile you are around the globe. How does that differentiate you guys from other players? What are the one or two more crucial competitive strengths that you would like to share with us that compared to others?
Okay, so this industry is actually a very, very niche one. And in any business, there's always two types of markets that you can delve into: the commodity market and the specialty market. So what we have always placed ourselves in this industry is to differentiate ourselves to our competitor, and we do not try to delve too much into the commodity region. So what we do is we produce highly specialized product. And how we do that is we continue to invest heavily in our R&D center in Malaysia to make sure that any products that we churn out from our factories are of the best quality, and our customer will have these stickiness factors with us, that they are not too eager to change to anybody, because our product can be just so addictive to them that, for example, our Philippine customers, when it started with us almost 10 years ago, they are still with us today. When we started our Indian factory 5 years ago, all those customers that have been with us are still with us today. So this is what we offer to our customers. Apart from the geographical region that we are everywhere, that reduces the lead time for them to get our product, there is also the stickiness factor from the high quality products that we sell to them. Because like I said earlier, rotational molding process, they rely very, very heavy on this raw material itself.
That's a good thing. I mean, not only like you mentioned, are you guys geographically sound, but you also have that R&D, have those features to actually specialize in all those specialty products that you own right now, which is a good thing for your investors to note. Now, talking about investors, okay, you guys are fresh off an IPO Ace Market listing on 25th of November, end of November 2025, which was not even a few weeks ago, okay? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how much equity funding that you managed to raise successfully, of course, on the Malaysia Stock Exchange during that Ace Market IPO on Bursa, and what are the key usage from the IPO proceeds that you raised recently?
Okay, so from the Ace market listing that concluded towards the end of November last month, we raised around 24.3 million of the market, and from that we have three-pronged approach and three goals in terms of the utilization of proceeds. First and foremost, like I told you earlier, our Australian market has grown tremendously in the past 3 years, but we are actually just barely scratching the surface there. So what we are planning to do is to set up, we are planning to rent a warehouse in Brisbane so that we are closer to our customer and we can reduce the delivery lead time. From there, we are actually planning to earmark 5.03 million in terms of renting the warehouse for almost 2 years and also hiring some personnel to man those inventory. And other than that, we are also going to use around 6.2 million for working capital to purchase all this raw material. Our business can be quite working capital intensive because of all this raw material that we purchase from the petrol company. And in anticipation of this revenue that is going to pick up in the next couple of months, we are also putting around 3.6 million in capital expenditure to set up a line in our Malaysia plant so that we can cater for these new customers that we will find in Australia. We are of course going to use at least around 2 million to reduce our gearing ratio by repaying some of our bank borrowings. Last and not least, we are going to put in a listing expense of around 7.45 million, and that sort of earmarks the entire 24.3 million.
Oh, wow.
Of the proceeds.
Okay, so that's pretty much locked down. I think all your proceeds are going to where it needs to go. Now, in large share capital basis, maybe you can briefly share with us who are now the major shareholders of your company after listing, and what's the public spread like upon listing?
So it still goes back to the day that when the company started. It is still being generally held by the three parties, the Malaysian parties, the Irish party, and the Filipino party. Across the three of them, they all hold around 24% of the enlarged share capital. And we meet the Bursa minimum requirement of public spread at 29%, which is spread among almost 3,000 shareholders. Our subscription rate during the IPO was quite good. So therefore, that 3,000 people. Apart from these 3,000 people, we have some individuals that were with us in the lead market days that has continued from then till today, and they are still happy to hang around with us.
All right, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. As long as they're happy, you're happy. All right, and everything is smooth and running. Okay, so my next question is a little bit more technical, more detailed about Polymer Link. It's about financial performance. All right, everyone always wants to know the numbers. So tell us a little bit about your company's financial performance over the past few financial years. Talk to us about the revenue, the profitability, as well as profit margin. What can you share with us with regards to this?
Okay, so from financial year 2022 up to today, financial year 2025, the recently concluded, our financial year end is in September. Our revenues ranges from 130 million to 150 million over the years. The profit after tax from these financial years also range from 9 to 11 million, and we remain quite healthy in terms of our profit margin at 6 to 9%. So if you look back at all these historical numbers, you can see that we have come across a couple of global events that everybody is quite familiar with. The pandemic, the Middle East conflict, and as of today, while we are not directly impacted by these global events, but it has, of course, caused a dip in our number. But what you can tell from all this financial year history that we have is we are able to normalize our revenue and profit margin quite easily right after all these events. And I believe the investors at large has sort of grown used to all these global events, that this event is lasting shorter and shorter. And that's what I can see.
All right. Okay, you did mention a little bit about those events, volatility. That's the key phrase or the word that I will use in the next question, which is that of managing that of volatility. All right. In your company's manufacturing business, of course, there are going to be a few cost components in your production process, correct? So how do you manage the volatility of your largest cost component? How do you that volatility that you experience, how do you try succumb or help improve upon those challenges?
Okay, so the key cost driver of our process is actually the raw material itself. It stands at almost 85%, if you can believe it. And these are raw materials that we purchase from petrol companies such as Petronas, Lotte, Titan, and PTT from Thailand. These raw materials are actually priced according to a pricing index that is well known in the industry called the crude oil pricing. It is quite tied to it. And this pricing index is also shared among both the suppliers and our customers. So they are generally receptive on the movement of this raw material. So what we do when I talk to my customers is we always come together and decide on a particular quantity that they want, and I will of course quote them the pricing of that particular quantity. And before we can move on to the next pricing, they have to finish up the entire quantity. So you could say that we are not a price taker, and thankfully we are able to pass on any cost increase or decrease to our customers right from the get-go.
All right. Fantastic. A good way to manage expectations for your investors as well. Now, based on the revenue that you've generated for the company, okay, what is the projected market share in your industry, and how is the future prospect for the subsegment of the petrochemical industry that Polymer Link is involved in over the next few years? So what do you think the market share is around for Polymer Link?
Okay, well, we do not position ourselves in that way because the polyethylene industry is too huge, and basically it consists of many types of processes that I mentioned earlier. And the rotation molding that I was talking about earlier is one of the smallest subsector in this entire industry. So instead of putting ourselves in the entire industry, what we can say that in our particular segment that we delve ourselves in, we are actually quite successful in all the regions that we are targeting. And like I was saying, in Australia, we are barely scratching the surface. At the moment, we are just maybe 3% of the entire industry. And why we are so laser focused in Australia is because 2 years ago, there was this particular petrol company in Australia that had an incident. They couldn't recover for it and they closed down their factory. So overnight, Australia has become a net import country, and they rely heavily from materials from outside of Australia. So that is why we are doubling down on our efforts in Australia because of all these competitors exiting from Australia because of the rising costs in Australia. You can imagine their minimum wages over there is almost 4,000 Aussie dollar per person. It's extremely huge, it's extremely high, and that's why we see a lot of opportunity of growth over there. Other than that, there's also Europe, which is also part of our expansion plan, that we plan to work with an agent or distributor to expand our footprint in Europe.
All right. I mean, it seems like you've already got that nailed down. I mean, expanding into Australia, which is a smart move indeed. And hopefully that will help with regards to market share, not only here in Malaysia, but also that of overseas in the global market. Now, we talk about a little bit about your competitors, all right? Poorer than expected share price as well as business performance from selected petrochemical companies. Not to mention names, but we've got like Petronas Chemical, Lotte Chemical, you did mention about them, TMK Chemicals as well, Sumi Saljana. How do you differentiate your company business performance from them in the long run?
Well, I'm glad you asked this question because our industry is actually quite not understood quite well. The companies that you mentioned earlier that is listed in Malaysia Stock Exchange are actually our suppliers. So what they sell us are just raw materials in its natural forms. And our company, what we do is we value add into this material and we add additives, performance enhancing additive, color pigments, and we grind it into powder and we sell it to our customers. So in a layman way, you could say that Petronas is supplying us rice, and what we do as a Michelin star chef is we add our roti telur and our eggs and whatnot, and we produce a very good fried rice, and then we sell it to our customer. So our customer base is much wider, and we have a lot of margin to play with in terms of the value that we add to the product compared to the roti kosong that we buy from Petronas. So you wouldn't want to compare us in that sense because it's just a totally different ballgame.
Yes, definitely. I mean, on one side, they're supplying you with the raw materials, but you're taking those raw materials and
elevating
turning it into something else, something completely different, which is a different ball game, like you mentioned. But I like your reference, Michelin star chef, Mr. Edward Koh. All right, so final question for the day before we end off our interview, of course. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to maybe share? One or two key important takeaways that the investing community, your shareholders that want to remember Polymer Link by? Anything you've got to add?
Okay, so our company is actually we have a very young and aspiring team, and this is part of actually the succession planning that we had from our founding members that started this business. And coming from lead market and today this year in the ACE market, we believe that we have a lot more room to grow, and we hope that the investing community will join us in this journey and look forward to all this potential storyline that we have lined up. Thank you for having me today, Juan.
All right, thank you so much, Edward, for your time, for coming in for this interview. You've definitely been a huge help. A lot to share for today's interview on Kleverstock, feature corporate interview. Your growth from lead market to ACE market recently, and we did mention before the interview started, hopefully main market in the future. This is something that you can aim for in the future. Your growth in Australia is definitely one thing that investors should keep an eye on, because that is an important milestone that you guys will be looking towards over the next few years as well. And yes, thank you so much for all the time. I hope to be seeing a lot more of your products around. I mean, it is something that Malaysians can witness on a daily basis. So, that's all from myself, Wan Izul Islam, right here on Kleverstock with Mr. Edward Koh from Polymer Link Holdings Berhad. And we'll see you in the next interview. Thank you very much.
Scan now and download Kleverstock, your trusted source for market insights.